All right, people. So we are on the third video. No, wait, the fourth video in our Learn Python series, and today we're going to learn about classes, object-oriented programming in Python. I'm using IntelliJ to write my code, but you can use pretty much any code editor that you want. I just prefer IntelliJ because it's easier to teach with. So I've opened it up. I've clicked on New Project. Excuse me. I'm going to call this classy, and IntelliJ will create a virtual environment for you, and I made a video explaining what virtual environments are and a link to it somewhere in the viewport. Is it called a viewport? Okay. Anyway, so you're going to create a project. It's getting fired up. Let me just drag it to this screen. Okay, so here we're going to create a new file. Right click and you're going to create a new file called classy. Again, just that, it's a Python file, and we will jump straight right in. Now let's look at an example of an explanation of classes I got from Google. Let's just change the interpreter here. We can just ignore this thing. I think it will pick the interpreter by default. Just disable inspection. So I got this explanation from ChatGPT. It says I asked what an object in Python is, and it says an object is an instance of a class. A class serves as a blueprint for creating objects. Each object created from a class can have its own attributes, data, and methods. Okay, attributes, data, sorry. This is very confusing to a beginner, and we will try to break all this down step by step. Now, there are two things we need to identify here. We need to identify attributes, and we need to identify methods. Now, remember when you are learning about functions, we said methods is just like functions, but they serve a different purpose. A class will help us create an object, and the methods is a collection of actions that will be performed on those objects. Now, to define a class, you start with the class keyword. Remember when you're defining functions, we started with define and then the function name. So we'll define a function. Now, before you jump into code, let's look at a sample of what we are trying to create. Assuming you're building an e-commerce application or a banking application, and you need a way to store the bank details or bank accounts. Now, we would start with bank account, and then we do just that. So in here, we will come and say username equals to the username of the account holder is Jared, and then the account number is 2333. Okay, so these are what we call attributes, and this we started by defining our class here. Now this is what we also call an object blueprint. That means we can create multiple bank account objects from this blueprint. A little bit confusing, but stay with me. So how do we create an object? So here we've defined the class. Define a class. You can say class blueprint if you want, but you can just say class. And then here you assign the attributes, then attribute 1. In coding we start from 0, so 0 1. So here we now create an object from that class. So we say, for example, user1 equals to bank account, and we do just that. So now we've created an object. Create an object. So this is what it means when we say a class is a blueprint for creating objects. So here we've defined our class and given it the attributes. That is a class blueprint, and then we've created a user object from that class blueprint. What next? We want to get the attributes of that object, so we can come down here and say user1 dot username, or you have to print, sorry. You have to print user1 dot username. username user1. That's confusing. Now let's run our code and see what we get. We are getting Jared, so we are getting this attribute of this object. So what if we wanted to get the account number as well? We can just say print user1 dot account number, and then we run our code. We see 233 is printed. Remember, we've said a class creates an object blueprint, but that is not really what we are doing here. Okay, we are, but you know, in more complex and advanced use cases, you would hardly create only one object from a class blueprint, because all we can do here is we can only create one object. So if you come down here and you create another object, let's say for example teacher, a lot of noise outside, teacher bank account, sorry, what am I doing, bank account, and then we try to get the attributes. We say teacher dot username. Oh, you have to print it. I keep forgetting I have to print teacher dot username. Now let's run our code. You see, Jared. So we have created two different objects, user1 and teacher, but they both are giving us the same username, which is rarely the case. So how can we avoid that? We can use what we call a dunder method. A dunder method is basically think of it like a way to help you pass in, create objects dynamically. Does that make sense? Anyway, let's have a look at it. So we will delete everything here. We just remain with the defining a class, and then here we will come and say diff init, and then we'll say self, but inside self we will pass in the username. Let me just use name. Username is confusing. We'll pass in the name. Since it's a bank account, we can also have the password. We can have the balance, and we can have the account number. So inside here, you'll come and say div.name equals to name. Sorry, not div. I'm confusing you. Self.name equals to name. Self.password equals to password. Self.balance equals to balance. And then account number equals to self.account number, sorry, self.account number equals to account number. Now I think you might have noticed I don't use a script to do these videos. I just have a concept. Okay, let me teach classes today. Of course I have the outline of, you know, the let's call it a crash course, but not the specific script. So I just jump right in and we start writing some code, which I find it fun. Anyway, so this is a dunder method. You use it to pass in attributes to a class in a way that it's dynamic, so that you don't have to hard code values here. As you can see, we are not saying name is Jared, age, whatever, password, blah blah blah. We're not saying all that. Okay, so now when we want to create an object from this class blueprint, all we have to do is we can come down here and say user1 equals to bank account, and then now we pass in the attributes to say the name is Jared, the password is let's say password, what else do we got? The balance is 233, and then the account number is, let's say, 222. Now Intel IJ does this, so you know, it just helps you to know which attribute, which arguments, which arguments are responding to which parameters you defined earlier. Again, refer back to the functions tutorial if you find this confusing. Now these are what we call positional arguments. That is why you see the name here comes first, because name is here. Now this one, put a pin on that, but these are positional arguments. So now we've created an object. Here we say created an object from the class blueprint. This is the class blueprint, and this is the object we are creating from the class blueprint. Get it? Object oriented programming. Now let's try and get the name. So we will say user1.name. God, I keep forgetting I have to print. Dot use. Can you guys see clearly? Let me just try to zoom in a little bit. Okay, so we'll say print user1.name, and we run our code. We see Jared is printed. If we want to get the what do we want to get? We want to get the balance. We will say user1.balance, and we get the balance. Now this way it now becomes easier to create multiple objects, because the essence of having a blueprint of pretty much anything, the essence of having a blueprint of a house is so that you can create multiple houses from that same blueprint. So we can create another object here. We can say teacher. Let's just go with teacher equals to bank account, and then now we pass in the arguments. We say the teacher is Mose. What do we have? The password is Mose123 or 23. What else do we have? We have the balance. We say the balance is 4,000, and the account number is 4444. Okay, just like that. Now down here we can try and get the account details for teacher. So we can say print teacher.name. So let's get the name of the teacher, and when we run our code we see Mose is printed. Let's get the what else can we get? We can get the balance. We can get the balance of the teacher. Say balance is printed. Now you see this way we can create multiple objects. This is another object. We can just say created object, created an object from the class blueprint. So everything you create down here and you pass in this, that means it will pick this as its blueprint. I've said blueprint so many times, but yes, we have looked at attributes. Remember we said we have attributes and we have methods. Now attributes are basically characteristics of that object. Methods are functions which will have instructions to perform on those objects that you create. So to create a method, remember I've said a method is basically a function. So you'll start with the def keyword. Assume you want to get the account information. So you'll say get account info, and we will pass in self. Now anytime you see self, just know we are referring to the object being created, like self, yes. So we'll pass in the self, and then down here we can come and say print. We want to get the self.name, and we also want to get the self.balance, for example, and we want to get self.account number. Okay, so that is a method. Now if you want to get the attributes, you just pass those attributes as arguments, and then you get those attributes like this. But what if you want to call a method on an object? So you do this. Let's just separate these two objects. So we have user1. We want to call the get account info method on user1. So you'll say user1 dot get account info there. And then let's just remove this for now, or we can just comment it, and we can also comment these ones out just to keep the whatever clean. So this is what we have. So this is a method we are calling on an object. Now you see how we are calling methods here is a little bit different from how we were calling functions from my other tutorial. Now let's run our code and see what gets printed. We see Jared 233 222. Okay, we've created the object, we've passed in the attributes. This one still remains, but we are getting the username, the account information. So we run it, and remember the account information is what you've defined in this method. So there's another way you can format whatever gets printed in the console, and is what we call f strings. So you just type f here, and then you put that curly bracket or curly braces. We could do something like this, and then we can say don't forget that so these are called f strings. They are a little bit tricky to explain, but just if you're following up the tutorial, you can just do what I do here. But basically, this will help us pass in strings that we define, that we type, and then it sort of just formats the output. So we can say user's name is, and then we do that. So let's run our code. User's name is that. We could also do this. Let's do this. Okay, so yeah, this is a funny way how f strings work, but as you can see, it just helps us format our output. So we can say the user's name is that user. We can say money in account, we do that, and then for account number, for account, then we do that, and then we run our code. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's hard to explain f strings, but just from this you can get the gist of what they do. So we can see here that user's name is Jared, money in account is 233, and for account 2222, which are all the attributes we passed in here. So this is how you define a method. Now, just to explain further, let's look at another method. Let's assume we want to double the money. So we will define a method here. Let's just format we'll define a method called double balance, and then we pass in the self as always, and then we say self dot balance equals to times 2. Now this is just a wait, oh, there's two self. Okay, this is just what am I doing? It's supposed to be that and that. Wait, now I'm confused. Self dot balance equals to, yes, that. Okay, so I will explain what this means. It's a little bit confusing, but let me just do that right now. This basically what we are saying is, we are saying self dot balance equals to self dot balance times 2. That is what the equal sign and that castar do, but people do that to keep the code simpler and easy to read, but we will just go with that. So after we've done that, we want to return, or we want to print self dot balance. Okay, so now for our newly created object, we want to call this method on that object. So we'll come down here and we say user1 dot double the balance, and then we run our code. We see 466 is the balance doubled. We passed in 233 as the balance times 2, that is 466. So we've called that method on that object created. So we can do a bunch of other things inside here, and not just getting stuff and printing stuff. For example, we can add an if statement here. Remember if statements from our previous guide? Yes, we can add an if statement inside here. So we can say, for example, let me just cut this. So we can say if balance is greater than or let's say is lower than 100, we want to if self dot balance is lower than 100, now we want to multiply that balance. Let's run our code. We see 233 is printed. Now assuming the balance is not less than 100, let's say if balance is less than 100, multiply the balance. Oh yes, the balance has not been multiplied, but it has been printed. Why are you printing the balance? Let's see. Print self dot balance. I think this should be here. Let's run our code. Okay, sorry, I had indented the print statement wrongly. Now the print statement needs to be here, and I think I'll make another guide on what indentation is all about in Python, but for now just know it's supposed to be in here. So we do run our code. We see that the balance is not being multiplied, but what if the balance was greater than 100? Let's say, for example, that. So we see the balance is being calculated. Now remember, I said in my previous article that if this returns true, the code indented inside it will run. If this returns false, the code inside it will not run. So that is how we define a class blueprint. And then we define methods. Methods are essentially a grouping of actions that will be performed on those objects. And then we instantiate or we create objects from that class blueprint. Now we can do a bunch of other things with different objects, but for now let's just remain with that. Now we want to dive a little bit deeper and try to sort of have a well-structured project. So we want to put this class into a separate file, and then we will leave this just here. So we can have another file. Let's just name this to what can you name it? Okay. I want to rename this to main.py. So okay, I haven't used this code editor much, so I don't even know where rename is. I don't know if is it on refactor? Oh yeah, refactor. And then we'll rename this to main.py. And then we'll create another file. We'll come here and we create another Python file, and we call that one classy. Now we want to copy the class blueprint. So we'll copy the class blueprint, not really copy, we'll cut it and we paste it inside classy, and then we leave this here. Let's just delete all this. Now, as you can see already, this is telling you, hey, I do not know what you're doing. So we will need to import this class. Let me just zoom in a little bit. We will need to import this class into this file. So we'll come here and we say from classy. We can say wait, is it classy or okay, from classy.py import bank. Let me just see, bank account. Okay, it's supposed to be from classy. I don't know why I said from classy.py. So we can say from classy import bank account. And this is how you structure your code or your project so that things become easier for other people to read and also for you to read later. Now let's run our code. You see, we are getting the same results. Nothing really has changed, but your code is well structured. So let's just delete this. We'll delete this, because import statements are normally on top of the file. So this is how you can structure your code. You can have a separate file for object creation, where you create your objects, and then you can have a separate file which will serve as your class blueprint, like we've shown here. So everything related to the class blueprint will go in here. Now let's look at a real world use case of classes and object oriented programming. Now here I have a project here. It's a fully integratable hospital management information system, and we'll have a look at some of the use cases of classes and object-oriented programming. Now, this HMIS is for hospitals, so that means one of the things you'll find in a hospital is patients. Funny. So the user interface has an option to create a patient. So for the receptionist or whoever is at the front desk, will come here and get all the information required to create a patient. Now all this information is handled by the backend after the save patient button is clicked. So when we come to the code, we look let's look for the patient class. Patient class should be on top here. Okay, and here we go. So this is how you can define attributes, but here we are using a web development framework called Django, so it handles things a little bit differently, but these are all attributes of this of any object that will be created from this class blueprint. And then we have methods. For example, this method will just get us the first name. This method will get us the age. Remember, when we are storing the patient information, we will get the date of birth and not the age. So we have a method here that will help us get the age. And we also have a method here, a save method, which basically whenever we save this this object, these are the instructions that will be executed, and so many more and so much more. So once the backend captures that object, it stores that object in the database. And I have a Postgres database here running. I can show you pretty quick. Takes its time. And then okay, let's open it. Local, it's EasyMed public, schema tables, and you go to the patient, and then we say view data. So the backend will capture that data and store it in the database as objects. So here we will refer to this patient 1 as an object, this patient 2 as an object. But what was the blueprint? What guided us on which data to capture for this patient? It is the class blueprint, which is right here. So that is how object-oriented programming works in Python, and that's how classes work in Python. Thank you very much. If you like the content I put up here, please consider subscribing and liking and sharing so that I can be motivated to keep producing content. I'll see you in the next one.